email app will automatically suggest 3 short replies for incoming messages based on the context of the message. It works by scanning the incoming emails, then using machine learning to formulate a natural language reply. Google says the more you use the feature, the better its suggestions will become. I'm Larry Olson.
Computer games company Activision Blizzard is set to buy the company that created Candy Crush. It's a deal worth almost $6 billion. Activision says the purchase of King Digital Entertainment will make it a global leader in interactive entertainment across multiple platforms. Powered by westernjournalism.com, this is the USA Radio Business Report. I'm Russ Jones.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
Podcasting about all things cannabis. This is CannabisRadio.com, a service of Cannabis Media. Stand by for another great hour of CannabisRadio.com. But first, let's get you informed with news around the world in 90 seconds.
USA Radio News. I'm Ron Taylor. Lake County, Illinois authorities are calling the shooting death of Fox Lake officer Charles Joseph Glinovitz a carefully staged suicide. Major Crimes Task Force Commander George Folinko expressed embarrassment while revealing that the lieutenant took his own life after committing extensive criminal acts.
This is the first time as a law enforcement officer that I felt ashamed by the acts of another police officer.
The officer was found dead on September 1st after he radioed to say he was chasing 3 suspects on foot. Folinko says Glinovitz has stolen thousands of dollars from a youth police program over about 7 years. It's sounding more and more like ISIS or an ISIS-affiliated group was behind the crash of a Russian jetliner that killed over 200 people. U.S. intelligence reportedly believes the plane went down in Egypt this past weekend as a result of a bomb planted inside. An ISIS-linked group has claimed responsibility for the explosion. Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders wants to legalize pot. The Vermont Independent introduced the Ending Federal Marijuana Prohibition Act on Wednesday. You're listening to USA Radio News.
From Feature Story News in London, I'm Ollie Barrett. UK Prime Minister David Cameron's hosting Egypt's President Sisi for talks in London as Britain grounds flights out of Sharm el-Sheikh over security fears. Myanmar's opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi says she will be above the president if she wins Sunday's election. And a major rescue operation is underway in Lahore in Pakistan to save what's thought to be dozens of people trapped in rubble after a factory collapsed.
Ganjapreneur.com, your guide to the cannabis business world. Ganjapreneur.com is a comprehensive resource for cannabis professionals and entrepreneurs. Download the Ganjapreneur app on your smartphone or tablet to catch up on cannabis industry news, scroll through our daily job listings, and learn about successful cannabis companies, executives, and investors. Ganjapreneur.com, helping Ganjapreneurs grow.
Chronicling the latest cannabis industry news and headlines.
Well, with 4 states with tax and regulate and the District of Columbia.
The state of cannabis.
Oh my God, it's refreshing. We have people that generally wouldn't speak on behalf of cannabis for fear of retribution, fear of losing your practices, fear of many of those things, and find ourselves in a place that we finally can.
Bringing you fact-based news and views and keeping listeners on the pulse of what's happening in the industry today. The state of cannabis. On demand anytime, only on CannabisRadio.com. It's time once again to Hemp Present, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Sowing the seeds of cannabis and sounding the praise of our favorite plant. It's time to Hemp Present. Our radio resident hempo sapien Vivian McPeak will present a weekly platform for guests and listeners to Hemp Present about hemp and cannabis from the legal, activist, and reformist route. Let's round up and roll it up for our headmaster of hemp, Vivian McPeak.
Welcome to Hemp Present, a weekly radio show where you can get your PhD in THC because you don't just want to burn it, you want to learn it. Seeking to defeat prohibition one interview at a time and advocating for the plant, the whole plant, and nothing but the plant. Join us for weekly radio rendezvous with some of the principal risk takers, movers and shakers, and history makers of the cannabis industry, culture, and reform movement. I'm your host, Vivian McPeak. I am the executive director of the world's largest annual cannabis policy reform event, the Seattle Hemp Fest, in its 24th year, found at hempfest.org. I'm also the author of the book Protestival, a 20-year retrospective of Seattle Hemp Fest from AHA Publishing. Transmitting from a fortified bunker under a ramshackle reefer radio warren at an undisclosed location deep within the bubbling bowels of underground TH Seattle, my goal is to spread the green flame of 420 truth in 30-minute increments. Today's guest on Hemp Present is grower, author, and activist extraordinaire Rick Simpson, who will be joining me in a few minutes. Rick is a retired power engineer who worked for 25 years in the medical system in Canada. In the 1970s, he was driving his car in his native Nova Scotia when a radio report came on about a study that found marijuana reduced cancerous tumors in mice. Specifically, researchers at the University of Virginia had found that several chemicals in marijuana acted against both cancerous tissue taken from mice and on cancerous tissue in the mice. And that was around the same time that his cousin, who was like a brother to Simpson, was diagnosed with cancer. Rick's cousin went the traditional route with treatment, and Rick watched his cousin quickly decline in health, dying a mere 3 months later. Then, a full 20 years after Simpson heard that radio report about cannabinoids slowing the growth of tumors in mice, he was working in the boiling room of a hospital when he suffered a concussion. For years afterwards, Rick had headaches, ringing in the ears, and trouble sleeping. He was prescribed a host of pharmaceutical drugs, but all they did was produce unwanted side effects. Then, in the late 90s, he saw a documentary, Reefer Madness 2, and info he gleaned from that experience convinced him to try to treat his symptoms with cannabis oil. But his doctor wouldn't prescribe him marijuana, so he had to grow his own. In desperation, Rick Simpson turned to the use of cannabis extracts, which he produced himself. He says he quickly found what he considers the greatest natural medicine on earth. Just small oral applications of oil the size of a single grain of rice brought Simpson's blood pressure down, his pain subsided, and he was getting 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep, restful sleep being one of the most critical components to our body's own ability to heal. Within a few months, he says, people saw the difference. In 2003, Simpson had a facial spot removed and biopsied. When 2 more spots appeared, he decided to apply some hemp oil to a bandage which he placed over the 2 skin lesions, and a few days later, he says they were gone. The biopsy had confirmed that the original spot removed was basal skin cancer. After seeing these amazing effects, Rick began supplying his friends and neighbors in his community with his oily cannabis concoction. To his amazement, just about everyone had some kind of good result to report, and it was not just people with cancer. Folks were reporting that their arthritis was better. In fact, people with other pain-related conditions were improving, and they were all sleeping through the night for the first time in weeks, maybe months. Even his own mother was reporting that her psoriasis had improved. Stunned by the dramatic improvement that the cannabis oil brought, Rick reported the news to his doctor, who wanted to hear nothing of it. Simpson then went to the traditional cancer-treating institutions, who wouldn't even talk to him. A friend and ally took the good news to the Canadian Legion and was swiftly booted out of the organization. Simpson had his home raided multiple times, having over 2,600 cannabis plants taken by the RCMP, yet he still continued to produce the oil and offer it to others free of charge. Since that time, Rick Simpson has taken his story to the world. He's currently located in Croatia, the Balkans, and Europe, and Simpson is forbidden to enter the United States due to his Canadian criminal convictions he received for cultivating cannabis and dispensing medicine to his community. But they can't stop Rick's voice from entering American airspace, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Rick Simpson to the show today. Hey, Rick, how you doing, bro?
I'm doing just fine, brother, and I'm very happy to be with you.
Welcome to Hemp Present on Cannabis Radio. I know it's 11 o'clock p.m. there. Did I get everything right on my intro?
More or less. There's a little bit, there's a little bit more that could have been added here and there, but you did a good job, brother. Very good.
Thanks, man. I want to tell you, as the 2001 High Times Magazine Freedom Fighter of the Year, I congratulate you, Rick, on your designation as the 2009 High Times Freedom Fighter. We're both in very auspicious company, and I'm honored by the association. You have become a true cannabis folk hero in your own time, or should I say toke hero, as well as a very controversial figure within the international cancer treatment industry, and a virtual global informational force to be reckoned with. Rick, can you give us a little background and tell us how you were introduced to cannabis initially? Were you a 1960s counterculture true believer who smoked pot recreationally, or were you a non-believer who experienced a conversion, or was it somewhere in the middle?
I was one of those backwards people that I actually never started smoking cannabis until I was about 35 years old. I used to be the guy with the beer bottle in my hand, but around the age of 35, the hangovers got to be too much, so I switched to cannabis. But I didn't look at it at that time like a medicine. I just looked at it recreationally. It was quite a few years later that I found out the true healing powers.
You know, the acronym RSO stands for Rick Simpson Oil, and in dispensaries across the land you can see products of various colors and viscosities made with various extraction methods marketed as RSO. In the same way that Kleenex has kind of come to represent any company's facial tissue paper, RSO has become a moniker applied by many to any form of hemp oil. But you've got very strict guidelines by which the oil must be made from, requiring buds, not sun leaves, and with very specific instructions regarding solvents. How do you feel about the mischaracterization of some cannabis oils being made by different means as RSO?
Well, I'm horrified that my name is being misused in this manner. I mean, it wasn't me that started calling it the RSO. That was Jack Hare himself who gave it the name. And then it just picked up from there. But, I mean, there's so many people out there, they're producing oil now, and they're all saying that they're producing the Rick Simpson oil. But I have no connection with any of these people. I mean, there's even organizations that say that I'm affiliated with them, and some people are even pretending to be me. It's totally ridiculous what I see going on right now, and, it horrifies me that so many people are being ripped off because, like when Jack gave it the name Rick Simpson Oil, all that really means is just that it's the highest grade medicinal oil possible. But I mean, so many people are producing lower quality oils, from the leaves and small buds, and they just don't have the potency of the buds, of the oils or extracts from the bud itself. So it really bothers me that all of this is taking place, but there's little or nothing I can do to stop it.
Well, maybe we can clear a little bit of that up today. What do you recommend people use as a solvent, or does that depend?
Well, it's really any pure solvent. I mean, there's many methods you can use to produce the oil. As a matter of fact, I've come up with new methods now that you can produce the oil with no solvents at all. That information is up on my website at phoenixtears.ca. But in Canada, I use what they call naphtha, which is hexane and pentane. It's, it worked out well as a solvent, 99% isopropyl alcohol, and actually my favorite solvent was ether, but the ether is quite hard to get, and it's very expensive, and alcohol is quite expensive too. But you see, the naphtha was available, like I used to buy it in 45-gallon drums right from the fuel supplier. So it used to work out to around $10 a gallon at that time, and so that, it was a very reasonable price for the solvent, and it did an excellent job, in producing these extracts. But, I mean, I can't speak for other methods. There's CO2 extractions and so many other different ways of doing this. But I do know, I mean, these, using the solvents that I used, that's, I produced these extracts, and it's these extracts that have given this oil its reputation as being such a wonderful healer for all diseases like cancer, multiple sclerosis, AIDS, arthritis, anything to do with chronic pain. I've called this oil a cure-all, and I don't call it a cure-all for no good reason. As a matter of fact, I mean, history even calls cannabis a panacea, and I think it's really the last few decades. I mean, since our corrupted governments outlawed the use of this plant, I really feel that this has been the darkest chapter in man's history, because when you take a medicine away that people need to heal, that's called genocide. And this is going on worldwide, everywhere you go. It's going on worldwide, and it's just a horror story to see all of these people suffering and dying and all of these ridiculous laws in place. I mean, anybody that looks at this subject, if you study the subject at all for just a short time, you soon find out that all of these laws and regulations, they were all put in place with the use of corruption. Cannabis never hurt anybody, for God's sakes, but it was all about the money. So this is the reason we're all suffering and dying, and I know it's happening now everywhere. I mean, one country after another is legalizing it, but at present, there's so many people in there trying to control it. What I'm fighting for is